Another wave of passengers infected with coronavirus are being offloaded from the Diamond Princess cruise ship that's docked in quarantine in Yokohama. The rest of the 3,700 passengers confined to their cabins are a week into a fortnight-long isolation. Food's being dropped outside their doors and people in internal cabins are allowed onto the deck for extremely limited amounts of time. Last time we talked to American Matthew Smith, who was on board, he was hoping to get a change of bed sheets and was feeling extremely lucky to have a balcony on his cabin. Today, when we spoke, the ship's captain had just announced another 39 passengers have tested positive for the virus. I asked Matthew if he's feeling like a sitting duck.
You know, my feelings are kind of mixed. They've been telling us despite some initial misinformation, it seems from what we got from the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo was that the World Health Organization and the Japanese health officials were on board with the idea of once we complete the 14 days and you haven't been either diagnosed or are not closely associated with someone diagnosed, that you'll be able to leave and return. And we've told that we wouldn't have to do an additional quarantine upon return to the U.S. My only concern at this point is we keep finding more people, and there's always just this tenor of near panic out there and hysteria that I don't know whether they're going to. It's the uncertainty of not knowing whether they're going to hold to that as a new batch of 38 cases comes out. Are they going to decide, well, no, we have to do something else, and you're going to have to stay on there longer? So it's just that uncertainty that we don't have a firm commitment yet as far as a release date.
So, Matthew, obviously, in terms of the quarantine period, you've got a week to go, but your fear is that someone will say, no, you have to stay longer or you're going into another quarantine.
Right. It's more that I would imagine they would say you have to stay longer, that they're not going to move us off the ship because, if you're thinking these people might be infected, the idea of trying to move a population of over 3,600 that's just guests to somewhere else, it seems to me would be logistically impossible. I guess I thought the most likely scenario, if it wasn't going to pan out, was that we'd seen in the news that the Japanese officials were discussing whether everyone should be tested before they're allowed out of quarantine, which wouldn't be a problem except that then you're talking about 3,600 plus throat swabs that have to be tested at a laboratory, and it sounded to me like it would be logistically difficult for them to get enough laboratories to work on that without extending the quarantine. So that focuses down to my most likely fear. And again, I don't have any reason to think it is going to happen. Just possible that they would say, well, we're going to come swab your throat, but it's going to take us, a week to get all these tests done, so you're going to have to stay.
In terms of the people who are being taken off the ship, the most recently diagnosed people, do you know who they are and whether you have had any contact with them?
No, and I think, unless people are in communicating with each other and we're some sort of gossip chain or we're in contact with the people being taken off or saw it on the news, there's no way for us to really know. We docked back in the pier this morning, and the captain said for operational reasons and for passenger reasons, he turned the ship around this time. So instead of facing the bay, we're facing the pier, and we'll be able to see the disembarkation process. But from what I've seen on the news, they have it all covered, and there's no way to see who they are. The Japanese keep the names confidential, and all you end up learning is the nationality and ages, basically. And we don't know anybody else on the ship, so no way of knowing if anybody that.
Are you communicating with other passengers, Matthew, in any way?
No, because we have a large balcony. We're not among those that are rotated out onto the decks. We can, if you go out on the balcony, you can see the people above who are out on their balconies at the edge. You can see the people below. But I actually don't want to engage with anyone because to me the idea was, okay, it's a quarantine and you need to, stay in your cabin and keep separate from anyone. So we don't really want to get into even partial close contact with the people outside. So we haven't communicated with any of them. Some people do. Some people stand out on the balconies and talk to each other, but I think I like the isolation because that's what makes the quarantine effective.
What are you missing?
Well, I'll tell you what my wife is missing because it's more interesting than I hadn't really thought about it. But she said she's missing tacos because we've been gone for a month now, and we're like back to home, back to some familiar foods and things that we enjoy, and our 2 cats.
Have you managed to get clean sheets yet?
Yes. In fact, I just made the bed with new linens this morning, and that's our second change since we got stuck in the cabin.
Small victories. Hey, do you know how you will get home once you are released?
Well, based on what we're informed by the embassy, that we can travel on commercial flights and there's no further quarantine. We have a pending reservation which based on the hope and belief that we'll get off on the 19th. Our plan is to spend a couple more days in Tokyo and then fly back on a commercial flight.
So you're basically still keen to have a look around after you get off the ship? You're not going to head straight home immediately?
No, it's kind of like having this decompression period before, traveling off. And I think of it now that I think it's like, okay, we've been stuck in this cabin, and do I really want to rush down to the airport and be stuck inside a plane for 11 hours or what it is? It's rather get a hotel room and just try and relax and, quietly move around and then go home.
And that's Matthew Smith, one of the passengers stuck on the Diamond Princess.